From the Wye Valley to the coast of Pembroke, I have just spent the last 2 weeks rambling across the entirety of South Wales, on an adventure to seek out some of Wales's most hidden historical relics and unknown medieval castles. On my adventure, I have travelled through fields, forests and mountain passes, in glorious sun and drenching rain. I have met some friends along the way and sought refuge in many fine pubs. So join me as we explore the great outdoors together on the Big South Wales Historical Ramble. And so the adventure begins. I start my journey on the Chpstow Bridge, with England behind me, the River Wye beneath me, and Wales in clear sight in front of me. Waving goodbye to my home country for the last time for the next 2 weeks, I am instantly faced with a monumental reminder of England's historically firm grip on the Welsh people. Chpstow Castle, built in 1067, making it possibly the first stone castle ever built in Britain by the Normans after the conquest of 1066, with other contenders being Pevensey and Richmond. The castle had changed and developed multiple times over its long history, but had always dominated the rocky cliff over the River Wye, protecting the town from potential marauders along the estuary. Of course, this gigantic stone construction is hardly a hidden relic of Wales. However, it does house a particularly intriguing item within its walls. These are the original doors of the front gatehouse of the castle. Dating to around 1190 AD, they are assumed to be the oldest castle doors in Europe. The construction is very advanced, as it includes both metal and wood in order to function correctly for a very long time. The timber used is a well-seasoned oak, an incredibly tough wood which also has a high stress barrier, which makes it an ideal material against sieges where they are likely to be violently targeted by axes, arrows, trebuchets and battering rams. The iron pins add additional strength to the doors and holds it all together, and it is also thought that the metal would prevent the timbers from swelling and malforming after wet weather, therefore preventing jamming or tension breaks. If these castle doors are truly 830 years old or older, they would have likely been purchased under the orders of Sir William Marshall, a famous English knight who controlled a large swathe of lands across the entirety of South Wales, including Chpstow Castle. His name will reoccur many times throughout my travels as I effectively retrace his steps. As much as I wanted to stay and marvel at this fine fortress and the town walls surrounding it, I understood that I only had just begun my travels and I had only walked roughly 300 foot from my starting position. Alas, I must leave the castle of Chpstow and venture northwards through the valley, hugging the River Wye to my next destination.
And every crave that I feel, and each time I vision it all, to make those dreams come real. Make those dreams come real.
Following the winding river, I finally approached my next destination, Tinton. Within this sleepy village situated along the Wye stands a centrepiece of great proportion. This is Tinton Abbey, a monastic giant and one of the best preserved medieval abbeys in all of Wales. The abbey was originally built in the early 12th century by the Cistercian monks, a religious house which was a breakaway from the powerful Benedictine order. The Cistercians followed strict rules of poverty, chastity and silence, with their guidelines of church building to be not within cities, in castles or villages, but in places remote from the conversation of man. Let there be no towers of stone for bells, nor of wood of an immoderate height, which are unsuited to the simplicity of the order, a guideline which evidently was not followed when it came to the construction of Tinton Abbey. Throughout its life, Tinton was prosperous during the Middle Ages, but its life was cut short as, on the 3rd of September 1536, the abbey was dissolved under the orders of King Henry VIII during the dissolution of the Monasteries Act. Again, this is just a whistle-stop tour, but long enough to highlight the reality of historic sites all across Britain and indeed the world. While buildings like this may be made of stone and have stood for 1,000 years or more, they won't be here forever. Cadw, the Welsh equivalent of English heritage, are currently halfway through a monumental conservation project to help repair and support the abbey ruins as the roof and columns are beginning to weather and crumble at an alarming rate. So we will allow Cadw to do its fine work as we continue on our route to our next stop, and certainly not getting distracted along the way.
So let love form the other. It drifts away so fast, losing moments to the past. This journey that's my life swiftly falls like a paper plane, like a paper plane, like a paper plane, like a paper plane, like a paper plane.
The third stop, Raglan Castle, a mighty stronghold of giant proportion. Originally built in the Norman period, this castle was in continuous use for over 600 years. However, there is pretty much nothing left of the original Norman foundations. Raglan saw its heyday in the 16th century, when the Somerset family purchased the castle and renovated it to a beautiful Renaissance stately home that you see today. Unfortunately, like many other castles across the land, Raglan met its end during the English Civil War. If you wanted to know the full history of Raglan Castle, I already have a video dedicated to it which I'll include in the description below, and I'll also add a link to a video made by a good friend of mine, Kevin Hicks from the History Squad. However, I will highlight a few interesting little features that you may easily miss when walking through the castle grounds. As you advance towards the castle's grand gatehouse, you'll find that the walls and towers are peppered in gun loops. Ideal for handgunners, arquebusiers, musketeers, or the big brass. Upon further inspection, you may realise that some of these gun loops aren't actually usable, with some at precarious heights and angles making them impossible to fire from. This may have been done for two reasons, the obvious one being that all these gun loops make the castle look much more defended than it really was, but also it could be a clever example of psychological warfare. As the castle developed over time, some blind spots may occur, where the attackers could easily hide knowing that the defenders can't get a clear shot, so the attackers could effectively take advantage of this by hiding in plain sight. In the modern British Army, this is known as dead ground. To prevent the enemy from using this in their favour, rather than building a whole new line of defences, you could easily just make some fake gun loops aimed at these blind spots to deter the opponent from standing there. After all, the enemy likely wouldn't know if anyone is standing behind those gun loops ready to fire. Speaking of gun loops, would you ever expect someone to fire at you from within the groove of a portcullis? Dotted around the castle grounds, you could also easily miss the several mason's marks etched into the stone blocks. There are many different symbols to mark the identity of various tradesmen, and it's quite fun to see which projects certain masons were working on during their time building the castle. A final note before we continue our journey: could this be the original piece of graffiti from 1644? We may never know, but what we do know for certain is after all this walking, I've earned a pint.
Green keyboard warrior, and Jesus like a bully keyboard warrior. On the media scene, keyboard warrior, and Jesus like a bully boy. When I arrived, you came across so sweet, but then you blew me away when I tried to make ends meet.
Tucked away, hidden in the valley, lays a castle half overgrown, overlooking the nearby medieval town of Usk. This site had already been established as an important strategic and military area long before the castle was ever built, having originally been a Roman fortress where their legions would be garrisoned before relocating further south down the river. Most of these castles were the classic motte and bailey design by the time of the Normans, but soon began to expand and develop along with the neighbouring town which the castle occupied. Usk was built in around 1120, at a similar time as the nearby castles of Monmouth and Abergavenny. Not long after its construction, the castle came under attack by local Welsh resistors of the Norman rule. The Normans soon took back the castle, but it was captured by the Welsh again in 1174 along with Abergavenny. So the Normans began working on strengthening the castle defences with the latest fortification technology. New stone walls, towers and a large castle keep were built, complete with an outer gatehouse which has now been transformed into the owner's main residence. In its new fortified state, Usk Castle survived various Welsh uprisings and even survived the English Civil War, only receiving a small amount of damage from slighting. Today the castle is a haven for local wildlife, hosting a plethora of butterflies and bird species who frequent the castle grounds. Another return visitor is the family dog, who was more than happy to play fetch with any new friend who stepped through the castle gates. And so, sitting on the grass in an overgrown castle residing in the Usk Valley, the first segment of my long journey comes to an end. Join me next time, where I will be continuing my adventure, getting a healthy dose of Roman rule, visiting one of the largest castles in all of Britain, and of course, another pint.
You've done it again. Irene, when will you end? You just do it time and time again.